In this video, we are going to look at one of the main types of chemical bonding, which is ionic bonding. So this type of bonding is called ionic bonding because it involves the presence of ions. Remember, ions are charged particles, and in the same way the compounds which are made up of ions will also be known as ionic compounds. In our previous video, formation of ions from atoms, we had a look at cations, and we said these are positively charged particles, while anions are negatively charged particles. Whenever you have two opposite charges, there will always be a force created between the two, and this force will be an attraction force. So the cations and anions are always held together by the strong forces of attraction, and these will be called ionic bonds or electrovalent bonds. So the process of these atoms sticking together is what will be the bond. So ionic bonds will be formed due to the Coulomb's force of attraction between opposite charges. Just like atoms have an equal number of protons and electrons, even an ionic bond has an equal number of positive charges and negative charges, and we shall see what we mean by that. And because of that, we shall always have an overall charge being 0 for an ionic compound. So what do we mean by equal number of positive charges and negative charges? Let's take an example of this common salt, sodium chloride. Sodium chloride contains sodium ions which are positively charged and the chloride ion which is negatively charged. You realize that we have one positive charge and we have one negative charge. However, when these two are together in our compound form, sodium chloride has no charge, so we can write it as NaCl. So the overall charge of this compound is 0, even if the individual ions have different charges. So a compound which is ionic will always have an overall charge of 0. Another example we can look at is calcium chloride. When we look at calcium chloride, we shall have calcium chloride. You realize that we shall have one calcium ion with two chloride ions. But still you will see that the total charge, here we have a 2 plus and this side we have 2 negative charges. So still the overall charge of the calcium compound, this one here, will be 0 because the 2 positive with the 2 negative will cancel out to have an overall charge of this compound to be 0. In this table, we are going to look at the formulae and nomenclature of some ionic compounds. So here we have the naming, the formula, and the ions present because we are looking at ionic compounds. We have aluminium oxide. It contains aluminium and oxygen is 0. And we have aluminium ion, which is aluminium 3 plus, and the oxide ion, which is O2 minus. Another example we have is ammonium chloride. It contains a cation, which is ammonium, and an ion, which is the chloride ion. We have calcium hydroxide containing calcium ions and hydroxide ions. So here we have our first radical. Some other compounds, we have calcium nitrate containing calcium ions and nitrate ions. We have magnesium chloride containing magnesium and chlorine, but in solution form or the ions present, we shall have magnesium ions and chloride ions. And then lastly, we can have a look at sodium. Sodium is a metal Then we have our carbonate, which is a radical. We shall have sodium carbonate as the formula of the ionic compound, but the cation present will be the sodium ion and the carbonate ion. So you can feel free to pause the video and check out other compounds. But one thing to note, we have positive charges and negative charges coming together because there must be ions present. That's why we call them ionic compounds. One thing you might have noticed on our previous table is that we were mainly dealing with metals and non-metals. However, we have some ionic compounds that are made up of non-metals only. But in most cases, ionic compounds will always be made up of a metal and a non-metal, with the exception of ammonium chloride. Feel free to go back and see ammonium chloride. It has no metal in it. So we have ammonium chloride. Remember, it contains the two ions, ammonium and our chloride ion. So nitrogen, hydrogen and chlorine, they are all non-metals. We have no metal present. So ammonium chloride is the only ionic compound in our previous table that does not contain a metal. So whenever we shall be dealing with a bond that involves a metal and a non-metal, we shall always call it ionic bonding, as we shall see later on when we are looking at the formation of an ionic bond. Why do we come to a conclusion that a metal and a non-metal will always be an ionic bond? So in our next video, we shall have a look at formation of an ionic bond. With this brief introduction on ionic bonding, let's have a look at our top 3 questions. Question 1, name the ions present in calcium nitrate. Question 2, ionic compounds are made up of a dash and a dash. You try and fill in appropriately. You can let me know in the comment section. Then question 3, give an example of an ionic compound made up of only non-metals. That should be easy to answer. Thanks for watching. If you find these videos helpful, don't forget to subscribe so that you are always notified whenever I upload new videos. In our next video, we shall look at formation of ionic bond. We shall try to go in details and see how does ionic bonding operate. Be well.